I felt the president went on another list of more promises.
Felt like it was just a ton of dacha, bridges, dacha. There's going to be a minister of weed. That's what they need. Fikile Mbalula, don't you think he's ready for higher office? Boom, I'm out.
When he said, for example, we're not going to be pushed over by Trump, I like that. But I said to myself, I hope he's sincere about it. It remains to be seen.
I don't think we should be so thin-skinned to think that President Trump wanted to bully us.
These other countries are having a negative view of South Africa based on the lies and misinformation of AfriForum, which is tantamount to treason.
For the first time, when I listened to the president, it was more of being biased to rural province.
Spread the fire. This is SMWX coming to you all the way in Cape Town following the State of the Nation Address 2025. We're going to give you rolling commentary from different actors, politicians, trade unionists, and there's also a puppet in offer. I am joined by a member of parliament from Konto Wesizwe, Papa Penny Ayeye, and Ayeye fits in with SMWX. Thank you very much. I mean, any immediate thoughts that you have from having listened to President Ramaphosa for almost 90 minutes?
Yeah, I was expecting to hear him is to end poverty, bring jobs. But what he was saying, someone give him that speech. It's not from him. It's from GNU, Government Not United.
And what's your sense with, that point on poverty? He did say that it's one of the key pillars of the medium-term, development plan. Are you not convinced that it came through very strongly in terms of measures to be applied?
I think he must count from 3 months from now, from today, 6 months. Those things he was saying, there's not going to be happen. Because that is a song of every year. The scratch of year. When people are busy dying, too much crime, because there's no job. I thought he gonna push more to say the whole factories in South Africa, they must go back to the ground as the villages. All this big town is for the market. We need like a China where they do it. You cannot see a factory in town. You are going to see a factory from there. Village. We're gonna reduce the stamping from people from the village coming to Joburg, crime, the street, you cannot work. We need that. But they failed from 30 years, from 94 until today. They're still singing one song because they take the man themselves and reach themselves. It's what I know. I've been with them for 14 years. I know. It's a misleading speech. Because he was lying, he talked about Limpopo. I'm from Limpopo. I know about the hospitals. They are dirty, no water. I know everything there. He was lying.
You're talking about water. He spent a lot of time talking about assisting local municipalities on water provision, promising that villagers and people in townships will no longer experience much water shortages. Are these not promises that you will be holding him accountable to?
The informer that they are telling him, they are misleading him. Because in terms of water, we have a very big scandal from GNU, Nandon to GNU. We spend a lot of billion, but people of GNU not receive the water. And then water is a life, is a future to the people. This thing is not going to happen because his term is the end term now. He's going to leave what he promised not done. We as the MK, we promise that we're going to make everything free. We're going to bring the country back. We're going to bring the land back to the people. It's what we were here for.
But the president telling us that, the country does not have enough money, is not able to invest as much. What is your sense of that? Realistically, when we say things will be free, the ordinary person sitting asks, where will the money come from?
He must tell us where's our mineral from 94. We don't count from the apartheid from 94 because Africa is about minerals, gold, everything. We have a lot of money. The gold is from here. Everything minerals from here. Where is it? Where is it? Because all Western countries, they are stealing from us. We are rich. It's because they are working under white people.
And what is your view? I mean, talking about that just lastly, over the weekend, beginning of the week, we had Minister Corne Mulder opening the mining investment in Indaba for Africa and saying that, maybe Africa should actually hold back its minerals in some of these threats being made by the West, particularly the United States.
The talk is very nice sometimes. I can sing a song, people dance, but tomorrow the song is not a hit. I sing today, tomorrow is finished. It was that one day song. It's going to be not hit. Whatever was presenting there, they send him to talk. There's nothing he can do. He's working, feeding his family.
Okay, Papa Penny, let us release you, but thank you for your time.
I hear.
I'm joined by the Parliamentary Whip of Rise Mzansi, Makashule Gana. A very good evening. The President has spoken. What are your immediate reactions?
So as Rise Mzansi, we do welcome the speech of the President. We see a lot of our proposals that were made to the President around the independent train operators, around the focus on water infrastructure being taken on board. Equally, the focus on local government, which will be key in terms of getting the economy of the country going. It's something that we've been championing and speaking about, and that it has been taken on board. It's a welcome development. We equally welcome the protection and trying to incentivize whistleblowers. The mooted introduction of the bill in Parliament is something that we support, but all these pronouncements have to be accompanied by the by the money. So this is a first step. We are going to look at the budget that's going to be tabled by Minister Godongwana on the 19th to see whether these pronouncements that the President has made tonight are empty promises or they will be realized.
And especially on that point, how will South Africans know that these are really concrete policies? I mean, if you look at, for example, the whistleblowers protection legislation that is mooted, as you are saying, the promises that it must happen within a year, some of these things seem as if it takes too long. In your sense, I mean, you are an experienced parliamentarian. Is there something that can be changed for legislation to be fast-tracked in Parliament? Because some of the things, it seems as if it takes too long to get them done.
So one of the things that we've been dealing with, at least in Parliament, both from programming but also in the strategy of Parliament, is how fast we can get critical legislation passed. Because even when you look at the issues around the financial task, the grey listing, it's in the pace that at which we are able to get critical legislation passed. So if the Ministry of Justice can table that bill in the next coming months, there will be commitment from Parliament to get it passed, because it's a critical one, especially when we have to fight corruption. But like I said, all these pronouncements that have been made this evening needs to be followed by the money. So one of the things that we are going to look for immediately when the budget is tabled is whether indeed the funding model to the municipalities has been revisited, has been changed to ensure that municipalities that do not have a strong revenue base can become sustainable. So that's something that we are looking for.
I mean, municipalities, SALGA, have been lobbying extensively for this, review, not only of the white paper, but of the funding model. We've been having this conversation for over 5 years. What is going to change this time around, and what will opposition parliamentarians like yourselves, who are also in the GNU, will be doing to ensure that these things are actually finally happening?
So for me, it's the pronouncements have been made in a very significant State of the Nation address by the President. And I must say, one of the other things that impressed me today is that he stood firm on the sovereignty of this country. Because as a country, we must never allow ourselves to be bullied. It doesn't matter what our immediate needs are. We must always stand strong for the benefit of this country, for the future of this country. But insofar as the local government funding model is concerned, is to ensure that when the budget is tabled, it speaks to that immediately. You cannot say that we are going to look at it in the next budget, that the announcement was made too late. The Ministry of Finance or Treasury knew that this pronouncement was going to be made, and that's why I said the first thing that we are going to do when we get that budget book is to look at whether this particular proposal has been funded appropriately.
Makashule Gana, thank you so much. I'm joined by the leader of one of the parties here in Parliament, UAT, United Africans for Transformation, Mr. Wanda Mahlatsi. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. The President has spoken, 90 minutes statement has been given. Maybe just a view first from your party as a leader.
No, thank you so much. You know, the President can articulate himself very well, and he tried to balance between the left and the right, but the missing part is the how part. Because when we came here, now the Expropriation Act is now a law. We wanted actually to know how he's going to talk to the program of action and what are the targets. The second part was the issue of DRC. When he says the soldiers are coming back, it's not enough. We need to put our people into confidence that when are they coming back? How is the process? Our fallen heroes must come back. Our injured heroes must come back. Even the soldiers who are not injured, they must come back because it's clear that this mission was not well coordinated. One will understand that South Africa alongside Tanzania and Malawi has been one of the experienced one in terms of troop contribution. Now, to say that it was not well funded, it is bad. So we're not going to accept that. The minister indicated clearly that South Africa didn't have enough ammunition. They don't have budget. That is actually exposing the vulnerability of the country. We wanted him to say, we will source the funding and there is no problem. The country is safe.
You are not convinced by the President trying to make a case really for that peace mission, saying that, millions of lives have been, lost in the DRC. The conflict has been going on for years and years, and that it was not about protecting mineral resources. It was not about protecting, interests of individuals, but really about the welfare of the people of the DRC. You are not really sold about that?
No, definitely. We are not sold. We are not sold because there's no transparency into this. Because every time you lose a soldier, or just one soldier, we have a crisis. But if you lose 13, then you must know you have a disaster. So the explanation must suit the disaster. People must put into confidence what is the mission about. Why are we there? Why are we in that mission? We have other countries, I think it's up to 12, who are assigned to SADC, but there's only 3 countries that are contributing the troops. Now the question is that, what did South Africans benefit from that mission? So we cannot benefit the imperialist, and now we are fighting the imperialist is the one that is offering the means of ammunition and weapons, and now we are talking about war. The UAT is clear. It's saying no to war. It's saying the president go to the president of Rwanda and make peace, because every time there's a bloodbath, it's equal to a profit of the imperialist. We're not that generation.
Maybe let's come back home just before we conclude. There are a lot of pressing issues in the domestic front. Cost of living. We just saw the petrol price going up, particularly this week on Wednesday. Household incomes are eroding their value and so on. Do you think that this issue was addressed adequately?
No, it was not. You also talked about the 3% target in terms of economic growth. How? Tell us the how part. How are you going to achieve that? You know what? I know on our level we talk policies and the GDP, but tonight is someone who's going to go to bed without food. Someone is going to sleep with the empty stomach. Our people are hungry. Our people are hungry. Our people are hungry. Now they are also involved in these drug things. Even the issue of drugs in our communities. They didn't even mention it. That thing is a pandemic. We need to talk about this Nyaope thing and fight it because it's among black people, moreover our youth. So there are issues that we have here, the issue of hunger, the issue of drugs, the issue of crime. The issue of crime is clear now. You'll see that they've destroyed our police system. The private security is better than our police system. Now they're destroying the army. So when we come to government, what are we going to manage? Because we don't even have the land.
Okay, Mana Mahlatsi, leader of UAT, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Kani mambo.
How was the speech for you?
The speech was fantastic. I loved it. I felt like it was just a ton of dacha, bridges, dacha. There's going to be a minister of weed. That's what they need. Fikile Mbalula, don't you think he's ready for higher office? Boom, I'm out.
Hemp and cannabis. But lastly, President made a lot of things. You've listened to a lot of these. Do you think that politicians are just promising us too much?
Yeah, the politicians use us. That's really all that's going on here. The most fun fact I've learned this week is that the president's spokesperson is Vincent Magwenya, and he's Cupcake and Fat Cook. Guys, I can't make this up.
Chester, thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
Bye-bye. The Deputy President of the United Democratic Movement, Nqabayomzi Kwankwa, very much good evening to you and welcome to SMWX. Some initial, remarks after sitting 90 minutes listening to the President?
Well, the State of the Nation address was idea-rich, but also a bit on the ambitious side in terms of its plan of how it intends to reignite economic growth. Where's the 900 billion rands that we intend to spend on infrastructure going to come from? But the other challenge is you also say, even if you had the money, you are going to premise it on the very same SOEs that are failing and collapsing, that are a drain on the fiscus. I could not reconcile those two and how they are going to happen. But I think the other issue which is important for me was when he cited that government intends opening up new ports in different provinces around the country. There's hope that that might be able to stimulate growth, especially growth within the African continent and possibly with the rest of the world. The fact that we are going to restructure, there's an intention to restructure the funding model for municipalities. I mean, I come from the Eastern Cape and so do you. You know, a lot of municipalities in rural communities have no revenue raising capacity at all. Yeah. And it's something that we've been harping on for years without the government actually paying attention to it. It's an indication that there are other partners around the table from the GNU perspective. I'm sure we're able to force them to listen to that issue.
Let me just stop you there so that we come back to this issue of SOEs, because exactly that, on that infrastructure funding, almost over a third of it is meant to come from SOEs. There still seems SOEs are in limbo in terms of where they are located. He talked about a new unit for SOEs reforms. What do you think about that?
Yeah, new unit, new things. We're just piling on more structures and more structures on top of problems that have been festering for a long time. I mean, the SOEs have been facing governance issues for a long time, and those governance issues in some of the SOEs have not been addressed. In some SOEs, there's a glimmer of hope in terms of the interventions that have been put in place. I do not see these SOEs being able to help us to reignite growth in South Africa. It's not going to happen, not anytime soon, up until they are able to stand on their own 2 feet and they stop being a drain on the fiscus.
Some projects like Umzimvubu Dam have been promised probably for the last 15 years and nothing has seemed to happen. The president actually spoken about this in some previous SONAs. Again, it is being mentioned. Are you confident that that project, which is meant to be catalytic for that region of the Eastern Cape around Port St. John's, that it will effectively start?
There was still a researcher and a speechwriter for President Bandu Olomisa when we first wrote to former President Zuma about the project. It seems like the first time the project was brought to the attention of the government was when President Fomba Mbeki was still the president of the country, and nearly 20 years later it has not been completed. And most of the work was done by the former Transkei government in terms of the due diligence, whatever that had to be done. They just had to take over the project and start implementing some of those issues, updating whatever they needed to update. So such projects, I think they are just mentioned here to provide a laundry list of things for government to pretend as if they are doing something significant about infrastructure development when that is not really happening on the ground.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Let's release you.
I'm much obliged to do that.
I'm going to be joined by not an unfamiliar face, Dr. Corne Mulder for the Freedom Front Plus. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, you are also part of the GNU. One could say this is also your speech, but let me allow you to act as the Freedom Front Plus.
Well, I really am a bit disappointed in the sense that I hope tonight that the President would have a much stronger speech with an emphasis on the government of national unity as an idea, as a vision for all of us, to inspire the nation and to put that in the forefront. But that didn't happen. It was more, to a certain extent, the same recipe, the same kind of things that we've heard in the past, new funds being formed, new projects being announced, new white papers, but that is not what the average person on the ground experiences. Year after year, these promises are made, but they are not coming to fruition, and people remain in the difficult positions that they are. And when the President even still bragged about some of the nice things about the government of national unity, ironically, those were from ministers that are not from the ANC. So that's unfortunate.
I think you raised something about the funds, and I really noticed that, and I realized maybe there are even some funds I'm not aware of their existence in the country. I'll be sitting down to really tally exactly how many funds he spoke about. I mean, he's also spoken about the fact that the state doesn't have money, which is why you need the blended financing from the private sector. A person sitting at home will even think, I mean, if you're looking at the missing middle in terms of higher education, when NSFAS is not even providing to its current demand, how do you begin begin with the missing middle. What is your reaction to
No,
that?
absolutely, you're absolutely right. Every year it's in this fund, that fund, and we are talking about billions and billions of rand. But something is wrong because those things do not come to the ground where the people are in dire need for that kind of assistance. And it was positive that the president indicated that he would like to get private sector involved. We welcome that. But the president made sure that he keeps the ANC intact in terms of his support base. He made sure that everybody knew that he's supporting Bella. He's very proud of that. He's going ahead with national insurance, health insurance. Even expropriation was to a certain extent mentioned in terms of land. So he's going on in terms of that. And then what concerns me is that we are talking about a government of national unity, but international relations seems to be the exclusive domain of the ANC. That is not the policy of a government of national unity, but the ANC has said from the beginning, this is ours, and we're not going to even discuss that. And that is really a problem. Interesting, right at the end, the president once again came back to the government of national unity and he said, it's wonderful when we can unite around a vision, which is true. And then he says, but we must have a national dialogue to determine a vision. So what vision do we have? So I understand and we support the whole notion in terms of the provisions of the government of national unity and the terms of reference in terms of economic growth, in terms of job creation. But we cannot continue with the same recipe year after year and think we're going to have different results.
Let's actually delve into that a little bit. I mean, he mentioned when we were here on the 18th of July that the GNU parties would have gone to a straight session, to develop this medium-term development plan. And he says this week it has actually now been adopted. But at the same time, the national dialogue must help us determine a 30-year plan. What is your posture to this national dialogue proposal?
No, absolutely. The fact is, I know that the medium-term framework and the project thing that they announced has been developed within the Lekgotla and in cabinet, etc., etc. But preferably that should only be done once we've got clarity in terms of a vision, in terms of the national dialogue and whatever the case may be. And that dialogue should have been happening a long time ago, immediately after the election and when the government of national unity was formed. But I think we are paying a price because of our system. The fact that we had to form a government of national unity within 14 days doesn't make sense, really. A government of national unity cannot mean that you bring a number of parties together and you accommodate people, but are we on the same page? And that is the question, or are we not on the same page?
Are we on the same page or not? And that's a very, very big question. I mean, of course, you spoke about the Expropriation Act, but a very tense week for South Africa, clearly under the spotlight coming particularly from the United States of America. The president said something there. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has even mentioned about G20 and possibly boycotting that. Ted Cruz made some remarks in that subcommittee on international affairs. I mean, what's your posture in some of these issues that are concentrated? Because I've been sort of getting a sense that it may well even divide some citizens of our country.
Yes, it does. And I think it's not necessarily about expropriation without compensation. That is now being mentioned. But I think we are on the radar of the United States, not now. We've been on that about 2 years ago. Some senators were starting to provide and to prepare legislation to have South Africa removed from the AGOA agreement. So it's not something new. It's been coming quite along. And I don't think there are a number of reasons. And I think one of them is the fact that South Africa has positioned ourselves internationally so strongly within the BRICS group, which quite clearly has indicated its aim in terms of opposing the United States, moving away from the dollar, etc. So the United States sees that as a threat. South Africa shouldn't tie ourselves internationally to either BRICS or the United States and the West. We should put on the table South Africa first and get what we can do to the best of our nation and our people from everywhere, from the United States. Let's get investments, let's trade with other countries. But it seems at the moment that we have painted ourselves a little bit in the corner. That's why the president now says he wants to send a very important delegation as soon as possible to try and go and explain. Yes, I welcome that. I think it's necessary.
And that statement that South Africa will not be bullied, do you stand by it?
I don't think we should be so thin-skinned to think that President Trump wanted to bully us. It's the United States' prerogative whether they want to cooperate with the country, whether they want to investigate, and we must understand that. But looking from the United States' position, we cannot be friends with enemies of the United States and then say to the United States, you must come and invest in South Africa. They don't have to do that if they don't want to. So I don't think that it's necessarily bullying. We shouldn't be that thin, our skin shouldn't be that thin. But what we need to do is find our own voice as a country that stands for all the right things and have a record that we are going to take that forward. And for that you need all the people on board. But at the moment, internally, the ANC cannot just push things through the way that it's happened because they were adopted in the previous parliament. But the political game has changed completely, and I would expect it that we reopen those kind of things and see how we can go forward.
Dr. Mulder, always a pleasure.
Thank you very much appreciated.
Let's go to that beautiful province of Limpopo. Hopefully I say it right. We're always accused of not saying it right. Premier Poppy Ramathuba joining me. A very good evening to you. I'm sure you're tired. It's a long ride coming here, but some reflections from your side, particularly, as a premier of, a largely rural province. President had a lot to say about issues of water. We know some of the issues that are still there in your province. How do you respond?
I think maybe I must say that I've been comforted that for the first time when I listened to the president, it was more of being biased to rural provinces. And because even when he talks about economic growth, he has to be specific this time and talk about an inclusive economic growth that would be focusing on those rural women who have always been left out. He spoke about an inclusive economy that must touch the lives of young people, that must touch people with disability. So his emphasis on that, I found it comforting to say we have always been focusing on people within urban areas, focusing on men. We have never put a lot of resources and investment. When he talks about municipality funding, the formulas being revised, being looked at, we have been complaining. You're quite right. My province, it's more than 80% rural, and some of these municipalities you expect them to collect revenue from where? So you would listen and you could see that today it was more of being factual. It was more of going back to the basics. And of course, when he talks about water, he really assisted me a lot. You would I'm sure you have noticed that he even went on to speak in Xitsonga. Because he knows the pain that the people of Guyana are going through.
And in that moment, he was telling the story of, people really wanting this water. And how far are we with that project? Because the president has visited, former Water and Sanitation Minister Senzo Mchunu also tried to push hard for that project to be completed. How far are we?
We are working hard with DWS and also the municipality, because you'll remember that provincial government do not necessarily have water authority, but as a province, because people do not know those dynamics, when they don't have water they think about the premier. So for me, that is why we establish a water war room that is coordinated from the premier's office to try to bring together the Lepelle Water Board, which is also responsible. Because it's for a provincial level, when we target a municipality, like currently we're busy with Polokwane. So we will have Polokwane municipality, we'll have Lepelle Water, and we'll have a Department of Water and Sanitation. So I can tell you there are many challenges that we need to deal with, even with that water in Mopani, where Guyana is. Because you'll find that the planning there's something that did not go right. I'm beginning to appreciate the challenges, because the source would be DWS, focusing on building the source of water. But the issue of reticulation being the responsibility of municipality. So you might find in certain areas, reticulation system is there, it has been completed, but it's not linked to any source. In other areas like Nandoni Dam, the source is there, but the reticulation system is not. So that is why I'm saying, when we come in as the Premier's office, we're then going to bring everybody together so that whatever projects Lepelle Water they're going to come up with, whatever projects that DWS or any municipality, they must be able to talk to each other. We have learned from what happened in the past, and of course the visit by the president and also the minister, including the current minister, where Sparkling Water did visited, and she has also seen, and also the deputy president. So we are putting all our efforts to make sure that that problem is resolved, and it will be resolved. We've already, by the way, started to activate certain projects where, because for me, I only refer to a project as and 100% or 99% completion when water is running in the taps. If there's no water coming out of the taps,
And that's what really matters to ordinary people. But let me talk to you as, in your cap as a doctor, a former, MEC for health in that province. President also spent a lot of time on health issues, health infrastructure, NHI. Seems as if we are still a long way out for the NHI. I mean, ministerial advisory committees to be appointed. Seems like they might need some time to do work. There's pushback on that. What promise can you give to people of Limpopo who might be looking forward to some of this, pooling of resources, particularly, as you know, in your province, you've also had the challenge of some people relying on Gauteng in some instances for tertiary health services.
For me, the excitement here was when he pronounced about the Siloam Hospital. If I can sit down with you and give you the history that the former president, in 2011, did turning and nothing happened for all these years. Now finally we have started constructing the hospital, and now today the president has emphasized the project was under threat in terms of the funding. Now that the president has pronounced it, we are comforted. It means that Treasury will put the funds to complete it. The project can be completed. The challenges were all those that I've already indicated. And also, if you go back, when I was MEC for Health, we came up with a bold decision to establish a medical school, the first ever since 1994. We've never had any medical school. We started one at the University of Limpopo. By then, we had no academic hospital. We said we'll use the existing Mankweng Rural Hospital, and students will also go to Polokwane. For these 5 years, remember, we already have a group that has completed and have completed their internship, and we were admitting 60, number of 60. Now we said we'll increase as time goes on because we did not have a well-resourced central hospital. People were saying you can't start, you need to wait. And I said, if we wait for that central hospital, it might not come in our lifetime. But if we start, it will come. And it has come. We did turning when I was an MEC for Health. Equally, the project was threatened to say it might not be completed in the time. Today, the president has again recommit that that hospital will be done. Exactly what you have said. Once we complete our central hospital, those super specialists that we don't have in our province, when somebody requires a cardiac bypass, must be on N1 north, south to Gauteng, will be gone, because already we have proven that we can run a medical school without a reliable. We can recruit specialists. When I started as MEC for Health, there were less than 10 specialists, and majority being family medicine. Today we are talking about more than almost 200. Now imagine when this academic hospital come, how many specialists can we bring? And also the fact that it will be a paperless hospital, a robotic hospital.
Interesting. And that ties in with, I suppose, the president talking about the central health records. You are pioneering those things, and I suppose congratulations on that. It's not easy to start a school. I mean, we saw with Nelson Mandela University when they were trying to establish their medical school, it was very tough. Just quickly, Premier, before we leave, in your opening of provincial legislature address, you spoke about the fact that you've got too many tomatoes, not enough tomato sauce coming from the province. I mean, President touched on agriculture as another pathway to growth, to achieve this over 3% economic growth. What will your contribution be as a province?
I think it's exactly what the president has been focusing on, industrialization. That is the only way we can be able to realize more jobs. The fact that we continue to export raw materials, it's a big challenge. Why don't we start processing them? Like you are saying, can't have timber in Makashule and Johannesburg, but you can't even manufacture a toothpick. So we have already started meeting with all this industry, following up on our investment conference where we saw almost 150 billion commitment. We've started following them up, and most of them, there are those who are focusing on beneficiation within the minerals and also the processing and industrialization of within the agriculture, supporting small-scale farmers to become commercial farmers, and those who are already producing, making also moving a step to say you don't only produce oranges or mangoes, let's also have juice. We are working with them. Remember, they will always come and tell you we are expertise in extracting the minerals, but processing them is not our expertise. Now we are also working with other countries, assisted by national ministers, to get those industrialists who can be able to help us on beneficiation.
Premier, thank you so much.
Thank you.
SMWX, I mean, MK Party really holding a clear debrief of the SONA 2025 immediately after the president was done here in the precinct of the, of Parliament, and that was led by of course, the caucus leader here in Parliament, but also the deputy president of the party, Mkhonto Party, Hlophe. Doc, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
What is your initial response? You've given also a press briefing to us here in the precinct.
Well, initially, the president, when he spoke about global affairs, when he said, for example, we're not going to be pushed over by Trump, I like that. But I said to myself, I hope he's sincere about it. It remains to be seen. Then he went on and spoke about the ideal state. This ideal state, one state, which is one state, you being united in diversity. I apologize. The problem with that is simply this. That's an ideal notion, but we all know that racism is a salient factor in South Africa. You can't talk about being united in diversity when virtually no steps are being taken by the government of national unity to deal with racism that manifests itself in this country on an ongoing basis. And it is the black people of this country who are the victims of racism. So one shouldn't be talking about those notions when the reality on the ground is that it's the black people who are being exploited and discriminated against.
I mean, just quickly, you used to have a colloquial saying about the GNU, Gijima Nangu Mtakati, in MK Party. Do you feel that, the colors of the GNU are changing, they are finding their feet, they have a coherent plan for the country, and these parties are actually really working together?
Well, they are working together because they have one thing in common, it's the blue lights. I suppose it's a good thing to be in the cabinet, which cabinet has been bloated. So much money is being paid on overtime for bodyguards and all those things. They enjoy it, but we are quite happy to be outside of the GNU and be the official opposition party, and that's what we are as the MK party.
And in that role as the official opposition party, the president spoke about some of the things that are dear to MK, like beneficiation of minerals. Is the proof in the pudding? Are you happy with some of the pronouncements that he made that may touch on some of the perspectives? He also spoke about working closely with traditional leaders, another point that's very important to the perspective of MK. Do you have any wins in that statement?
That's very close to our heart, and I hope he's sincere in that regard. Talking briefly about traditional leaders, one of the problems we've had in the past, there are traditional leaders that are recognized, and many other traditional leaders are not recognized. So I think we have to move to a situation whereby traditional leaders, whether they are recognized or not, are respected. On the issue of beneficiation of mines, we as the MK Party want our mines to benefit South Africans. We don't want to export raw material. We want to process our own raw materials here, our own gold, our own platinum, and make products in this country.
Dr. Hlophe, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Ndiyabulela mhlekazi.
Siyabonga kakhulu. I'm joined by ATM leader Vuyo Zungula. Very good evening to you. And of course, I'm sure you've got a lot of reflections to say on what the president said. He kept you almost 90 minutes seated and concentrating.
He did not say anything fundamental, though. Almost everything that he spoke about, except the DRC issue, the issue with the USA, has been saying the same thing since 2018. And he missed an opportunity on the issue with the USA. He can be firm while saying that we'll not be bullied, we are going to take care of our national interests. But he does not address the elephant in the room, which is the AfriForum. Because these other countries are having a negative view of South Africa based on the lies and misinformation of AfriForum, which is tantamount to treason. So the fact that he's saying nothing about AfriForum, it means he's not addressing the root causes of the problem. So that's the one thing. The second thing is that when it comes to the DRC issue, we've been issuing condolences ever since we found out about the problem. But he should have been telling the nation why our soldiers in the DRC, and now that the DRC army has fled Goma, what is he going to do? What then is the mission of our soldiers there? And lastly, our children died due to food poisoning last year. It did not feature, it did not move him to say on the first SONA after the deaths of our children, he's going to talk about that. He says nothing about the registration of foreign-owned spaza shops. He says nothing about illegal immigration and the respective crimes that are a result of illegal immigration. So we are not moved.
Let me go back to the DRC quickly. I mean, he spoke about silencing the guns in Africa forever. He spoke about, trying to protect the welfare and the rights of the people of the DRC. I mean, you are clearly not convinced by those statements, because he was refuting some of the statements that have been coming from some parties, saying that maybe there are mineral interests and personal and self-interest that are being protected there. He seemed to have been quite punchy in defending himself there without really addressing those parties.
Indeed, the issue of the DRC, the world superpowers, the countries have got their interests. South African politicians, they have got their interests. Even Rwanda has got interests in terms of the minerals that are there. So that is why they will never have appetite to correctly deal with the problem in the best interest of the people of the DRC. But the biggest question that needs to be asked in this particular case is that when this mission was announced, it was to say the government has deployed so many soldiers to support the DRC army. If the DRC army runs away, what then becomes a mission? Because they were not going there on a peacekeeping mission that is out of the blue. They were going to a peacekeeping mission that is attached to supporting the local army. When the local army runs away, bayotini palamajon.
Well, I'm sure you will be bringing some of those during the debate of the SONA here in Parliament. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Deputy Leader of BOSA, Build One South Africa, Nobunto Hlazo-Webster. I'm sure you were smiling when the president was almost ending off there saying we must be builders on a lighter note.
We were like, absolutely, President, we've been saying, let's build one South Africa. Absolutely, yes.
But what are some of your remarks? I mean, he touched on a lot of things. Speech started very heavily political and then became almost like a bullet point of promises, in my view. But anyway, let's hear from your view. I'm not the politician here.
So first of all, the State of the Nation address must depict the state of the nation. And my sense was that the president didn't really speak to the state of the nation, the reality as we know it. The close to 70% unemployed youth that are sitting, professionals that are starting to lose their jobs, and that's a reality that we have in our country. So I did not feel that the president depicted the state of the nation as it is. But secondly, and most important for me, more than the vision, which is important, the plans, which is important, the promises, there must be accountability. You hope that what you will get from the State of the Nation address is a sense of accountability. And instead what we got is the same promises that we've had previously without accounting for the previous. And so I'll make an example. The president spoke so much tonight about women and economic development. But the same president in a State of the Nation address committed to 40% of procurement being in public procurement being for women-owned businesses. Yet we've only seen 1 to 5% of that happening. But now you come with a new program and a new promise. You haven't delivered or accounted for the previous. That's just one example. You hear about infrastructure and these promises of infrastructure, the infrastructure fund. You promised a smart city. Where's the smart city?
Tell me, you've been in Parliament now for a few months. I'm sure it's quite an experience for you to see how these things work and are done. I mean, to the point you are raising, I got a sense that it might take us a little bit more, too long a time to pass legislation, get the regulations done, like promises of within a year. And you would think that these things are needed, as in like yesterday. What's the bottleneck in Parliament?
So first of all, there is a reality that you're talking about, that there isn't a sense of urgency. There isn't a sense of urgency. The bottleneck in Parliament really, and I think one is that you have 70% of Parliament forming the GNU. And so that is actually a real challenge that you have, because you don't actually have the robustness that you would need to have, that you would have had previously from an opposition that will push for the bills. And that's where we come in. As centrist parties, we've actually decided that we're going to, as Build One South Africa, work with other centrist parties to form a caucus in Parliament so that we strengthen our voice and so that we have the robustness that is needed in Parliament. But the second is to say that sitting in those portfolio committees, there isn't always the delivery that you need to have. Part of what I've found is that you have annual performance plans that don't actually speak to delivery, that speak to being tick boxes and not actual delivery on the implementation of policies that you need to see. That's a real bottleneck. Even other than legislation, that kind of implementation is a real bottleneck, and the work then becomes doing that oversight work and accountability work really strongly as opposition parties.
Just lastly, on something you were quite passionate about during the campaign, which is water. I mean, I saw you drilling some boreholes and things like that. The president spent a lot of time on water infrastructure, water management strategies, talking about the mooted national agency. And do you think we're on the right path?
You know, it was good to hear the president, because we've been saying for a long time, as you articulate now, that there's a water crisis, and the presidency would deny it, and everybody would deny it. So it was good for the president to actually acknowledge and say the words, we have a water crisis. And so part of what I welcome are the plans to now start focusing on the projects that are already existing, the Lesotho water projects, etc. But more than anything, what I've been saying is that the Water Services Act actually authorizes the Department of Water and Sanitation to be able to have players that intervene in instances where municipalities are failing to deliver on water. And the president spoke about starting to distribute water licenses for that delivery. And so that is something that I actually welcome. But again, it becomes an issue of implementation, and we'll watch that closely. We're also on the Water Portfolio Committee as well as Trade and Industry. So we'll watch that on that committee to make sure that it's implemented.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Lukon.
I'm joined by the leader of Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane. I'm sure, 90 minutes is a long time on those seats at the City Hall, listening to the president patiently. What are some of your responses?
Firstly, I think the tone set up front was correct. We're living in difficult times. We're facing global headwinds. And more crucially, South Africa's economy has only been growing at 1% over the last 10 years. But what is sad is that the tone wasn't matched by commensurate action. What we desperately needed tonight was to stop making more promises. I felt the president went on another list of more promises. But when you reflect from year to year, last year the president promised us a business development center where people could be efficient at processing. None of that has been delivered. Digitization on spectrum allocation, none of that has been delivered. When you look at South Africa's fiscal position, year on year, you realize that debt is the increasing aspect, and the learning and culture function still is the highest expenditure, but we cannot meet those obligations. So the reality is that I felt tonight the president needed to move from promises to a tangible plan that focuses on a few priorities and actual accountability on that.
Now he's back at over 3% GDP growth, and he's saying that infrastructure will be a key catalyst of that. We've seen that movie before. In 2010 there was a very big infrastructure rollout program that was implemented, but that necessarily didn't lead to GDP growth. What are your views? What could change this time around?
Well, infrastructure growth nebulously it's just a nice catchphrase. We all agree we need to build infrastructure. If you really want to build infrastructure, what you should be announcing is twofold. One is, I thought there should have been a focus on transport. If the president announced the fact that you are expanding rail infrastructure from Gauteng to the northwest, to the Free State, to Mpumalanga, if you created just that node alone, suddenly, even if you are an investor sitting in another part of the world, you suddenly are thinking, oh, okay, they're going to build rail to Free State. Are there assets there that I can invest in? That is directing infrastructure growth, rather than just nebulously saying these are these nice things. More crucially, when you look at municipal infrastructure or water infrastructure, as the president spoke about, the reality of it is that on municipal infrastructure collapses not only because it doesn't have money, it collapses because people are corrupt in municipalities. and there's no competence and skills. So you need to make sure that you upend your education program, you ensure that people are passing at 50%, or you got better graduates going into municipalities, and furthermore, the political leadership needs to improve so that it can make better decisions. But if you've got poor political leadership, weak infrastructure in terms of the capability of people coming in there, you'll never build infrastructure. So to me, I think tonight was almost pie in the sky without the idea of saying, here's the tangible plans year on year so that we can measure it accurately next year.
Let's talk a bit about corruption. I mean, some forensic center to investigate being mooted, legislation on whistleblowers. He was praising the SIU and the Asset Forfeiture Unit, and of course, the work of the investigative directorate. Are you really convinced that this is enough of infrastructure for corruption, the fight against corruption, but also prosecutions against the Zondo Commission recommendations?
Again, when I look at the SIU's budget, let's not wait. I don't like to talk in high convoluted things. Let's look at real rands and cents. SIU is operating at 48% capacity at the moment against a backlog of cases that they are taking multiple years to prosecute. If you want a court date in the Gauteng North High Court, you are going to wait 4 years. So the reality is that by the time you appear before court, without an appeal, without anything, the matter, the case itself, has been through so many different issues. So the reality of it is that if we're serious about it, if you want to tell me you are going to fight corruption, rather than announcing some fund for a big cabinet of the largest cabinet in the world, cut the cabinet in half, save yourself 600 million, then say, I'm taking that 600 million, I'm setting up specialized courts so that within 3 months, those who were implicated in Zondo Commission are facing prosecution and will end up in court. Then I'm listening to you. But flowery language doesn't help. I saw this. Brazil actually established many specialized courts, and ultimately it moved the pace at a much higher level. The reality of it is that even in the executive itself, there are many people who have got serious allegations against them. Yet the president, instead of saying, here's the deliberate, decisive action, it's just a redeployment from one place to another, which sets the tone right throughout the system. And when you listen to municipal managers, municipalities where corruption is rife, you appreciate that we'll never get there. So I would have urged that actually it's not wishful thinking rather than actual deliberate action is what's needed.
Thank you so much. We'll be on the lookout for your debate of the SONA in the coming week.
I look forward to it myself. Thank you very much.
Yes, SONA 2025, and I am now joined by the one and only president of COSATU. It's not really a great time for the workers. We hear about, job cuts here, this wants to shut down and so on. What's your reaction to the SONA?
Thank you very much for having us, Lukon. Look, indeed, not a great year to start with the fatalities in the mining industry. We lost 5 mine workers in the past 2 days. Also, the job cuts, the retrenchments that are taking place. But with the State of the Nation address by the President, it spoke to some of the areas that we had expectations on. Just a few, it is on the social relief distress grant. We're happy that the President now is speaking about what we have always been calling for, the basic income grant for our people. We're hopeful that we are going to see that moving to its implementation for real, and that basic income grant will really measure into the living standards of our people. But also, we are happy that the President made an emphasis on the TVET colleges in terms of artisan skills that are needed. Because if you are going to pronounce on a 943 billion on infrastructure spending, then you need to have the labor that is ready to be absorbed in those programs. Instead of spending 943 billion and then you say we need to have skills but South Africans do not have them. So we hope that there's a link that we are making, and we hope that government will be making that link of the skills that our people must have, support to the TVET colleges, and also saying that to grow the economy, if you are going to have that spending
but you also need to have people that have the required skills. And we're also saying that on the 19th of February, we're hoping that we're not going to have a different tune from Treasury that negates the very same State of the Nation address. We are worried because the National Health Insurance wants you to start spending, filling up the vacant post, employing the unemployed doctors in order for you just to fix the health crisis that you have before you can even start saying these are the phases of implementing the National Health Insurance. So we're hoping that what the president have said will have a linkage to what Minister of Finance will be saying on the 19th of February.
And at times we've seen that disjuncture between the presidency and Treasury really digging its heels at times. But I want to come back to this issue of TVET colleges and artisanal skills that we need to have invested. I mean, you'll know in various sectors of your trade union where you operate that part of the problem is that actually some of the private companies the president was appealing to give experiential learning to those who are in TVET colleges. They actually have in-housed skills development. And the people in the TVET sector have been saying there needs to be a rationalization of that process between in-house, particularly in the mining sector, for example, or in the automobile sector. How are you engaging the private sector to make sure that there is linkage between TVETs and the private sector and not just a few who may be part of some artisanal in-house program?
Mm-hmm. Look, Anna, it is correct that there are those training programs in workplaces by these, whether it's mining or it's in the auto sector. But of course, because we are saying the TVET colleges must respond to what the economy requires. So you can't have a TVET that continues to produce artisans when the skills that they are getting does not match what is required by the economy. So we are hopeful that as trade unions ourselves, I think we have that responsibility of ensuring that those that are responsible for worker education in the federation and also in the trade unions will be also dealing with this issue of ensuring that what happens in the TVET colleges has a relationship with what happens in the workplace, because also at times before you are employed you need to have had certain skills. So it is something else when you are inside and you are then majoring on those skills. But that is why it is important that the TVET colleges understands what the economy requires and therefore produce artisans that will be able to fit into these sectors of our economy. And you are making a good point. We also have a responsibility as trade unions to continue to have those talks, not just TVET and workplace skills plan, but also in terms of sitters. Because a lot of money is in the sitters, but is what is given, training that is given by the sitters to workers relevant to what the economy requires. And these are the things that ourselves as trade unions who are sitting in the sitters, who are also sitting in the workplace skills plan in developing them, we have to answer those questions that you are asking. And we have a responsibility as a federation, as trade unions, to ensure that the shop stewards that are elected to sit in those positions are really responding to the needs that this economy requires.
I mean, another big elephant in the room with its mandate always being contested. When will the sitters' mandate end? When will it end? How do we reconfigure? But let me just ask you, save your throat, last question. COSATU surely has a perspective on the presidency of Donald Trump that literally has been in place for about a week and a half, but it feels like a decade. Of course, there are certain things that are happening. I'm sure there are some people in the health space that are being affected, that may be unionized by some of the freezes, but also there are just some very serious pronouncements that are being made which might shape and reshape global trade and have impact on certain industries here in the country. What's the COSATU perspective?
Look, we, as you would know, that COSATU has been going to Washington with business and government in negotiating for the AGOA renewal for the past 3 years or more. And we will continue to do that. We're hopeful that when President announced that there will be teams that you will be sending, that labor, not just COSATU, but organized labor will form part of those teams that will be going to Africa and also in Europe to speak about investment that must come to South Africa. The lessons that we should be learning from Donald Trump is that we must never rely on other people in other countries to take care of our own people. The 8 billion is a lot, especially when it gets taken away from you with immediate effect. It then says that the things that we must put together as government and ourselves working together as labor, business and community is to ensure that we deal with issues of corruption, because that's a wasteful expenditure, that's where leakages are. That money that comes, the fiscus, what we're putting in, is really budgeted such that it addresses these issues of HIV and AIDS, the community work programs, and your EPWP, and everything else that this 8 billion was talking about. We cannot rely on the health of our people and rely on another government. We cannot. And we are hopeful that this is a lesson that South Africa is learning in Africa. When President spoke about what we must do in relation to Africa Continental Free Trade Area, it's a starting point that is important. We can't always be happy about being part of BRICS, being part of EPA, being part of that, when it means nothing to us in terms of the real growth that we want to see, such that we're able to take our people out of poverty. So we can't, President Trump is a work in progress. We must agree that some of those issues, we must leave them to government. We have our counterparts in the US, the AFL-CIO, which is a federation, sister federation, that we work with, that we do engage with on these issues, that becomes our lobby group when we want to speak to Republicans or Democrats in the US on certain bills. So we will continue to engage them with all the problems that they themselves have to deal with. We have our government of national unity. Let us make sure that it works for our people. Let us make sure that we are holding each and every member of cabinet accountable in this government of national unity. But we need to build more friends internationally. On trade issues, we think that we must always say that the geopolitics must not necessarily have a direct impact on trade relations. We must be able to have a separation of that. Our foreign policy is not going to be favorable to others. So as their foreign policy is not going to be favorable to others. But trade is a win-win. It is our money, the pension funds of workers in South Africa, that gets invested in the world, so as the pension fund of workers in the US that gets invested in South Africa and in the African continent. We have to say what is in the interest of the both countries that have trade agreements, and let's let the politicians deal with the rest.
Let's let the politicians deal with the rest. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it from me, Luko Namguni, right here on SMWX. We are wrapping up, and we have concluded hearing from all those political actors who are influential in South African politics. Please do engage in the debate in your comment sections, but we will also be following the big debate on SONA. I'm sure it's going to be one to watch out for, with some firecrackers and some people really giving it to the president when they respond to his State of the Nation address. For now, you stay well and stay tuned to SMWX. Aye, yeah.